welcome to Revive Ministries Podcast. This month, we're addressing building a safer community. When we think about communities, they usually play a bigger role in our health, in our relationships, in our life than we like to admit. Today, I will be sharing some insight from my own experience, from just what I've seen. And I feel that just like we had a guest from Poland. I like always hearing um, different aspects of it, and I do appreciate those who do come on to the podcast and to share this whole Revive Ministry podcast. Has been a real blessing just to have a moment to kind of talk about topics like this one. And like building a safer community seems simple enough, but when you think about it in the context of your own life, about how you deal with your day to day, it can be a little bit, deeper if you really think about it. I want to give a disclaimer. If you're in the US, 988 is a suicide crisis lifeline. It's available in the States, but wherever you are around the world, I do encourage you to find what works for you. H. Jackson Brown Jr. says, "Remember, the happiest people are not those getting more, but those giving more." A lot of times when we think about community, it's kind of attached to um, serving. Communities traditionally in the very beginning were a community that you had families, friends. They all were working together for the common good of of that, whether it's a town or there's something about helping each other's needs. When we think of the context of a church per se, in faith-based communities, especially in Christian faith, there's this idea that everyone plays a role to kind of further the Great Commission. When you think about any other organization, whether it's NAMI, National Alliance for Mental Illness, a lot of times they're trying to push the education of mental health into the communities. They uniquely started from parents, mothers who saw that their child was not treated very well. So when you think about communities, they gain a lot of their, joy, their kind of strength, their passion through serving. So a lot of times the cornerstones for a lot of healthier, a lot more active communities is serving. So yes, in the long term scheme of community, you do end up getting more. I've personally feel like being around people, giving more, allows me the opportunity to talk to people that I may not normally would, and whatever facet of society, whatever work environment, whatever volunteer position, whatever school environment you're in, you always have this opportunity because we're not islands. And with all that being said, service and community works a lot of times hand in hand together. In the macro sense, it feels nice to live in a safer community. A lot of times, there's a lot of different factors. Jobs, when it comes to crime and other factors. But in a more micro sense, when you think about your own factors, it could simply mean if I feel supported. You could be around a whole bunch of people. You could be in a big community and feel utterly alone, and not by choice, just literally feel that no one, not one person, even knows you exist. We're heading out of the pandemic, and the world has changed. I believe, at least individually, it has changed what the definition of a safe community is. And even before the pandemic, when we think about the internet, where you're watching this, where you're listening to this, before, when I was growing up, there was barely any real internet. There wasn't what we have today. Social media, when we think about how we connect, how many different ways we connect, The substance, at least from my experience, has diminished. Um, I can remember when, when I called someone, it was, there was no caller ID. You called them and you waited to hear from you. You may leave a voice message, but when you're receiving the call, you wouldn't know unless you star 69 or in the States. You would have to pick it up and just answer. It could be anyone at that point. But when you think about how that has changed, how we look at things, when we think about before, when cities were being built more and more, when in the turn of the century during the Industrial Revolution, of how factories were being built, how we were consuming, how we're building more, and how that has impacted how we communicate and how we connect today, which is a big factor when you think about what a community really is. Um, Kali Gibran, I'm hoping I'm saying this right, says it this way: I've learned silence from the talkative, toleration from the intolerant, and kindness from the unkind. Yet strange, I'm ungrateful to these teachers. Well, like I said many a times, we learn more. I learn more from those people I don't agree with. I feel customarily, the only worry I have, I guess, presently in what I've seen is this push on convenience. And I think we don't learn much in our convenience. This quote really stands out to me because I learned a lot more from people I don't like or I didn't have a great experience from. And if we look at things that way and we look at what a community and building community, I think, if we're really being honest, there's several in our community or even within our families that we would say it's hard, and I think that's the point. It is hard. It is hard to connect. It is hard to have opposing ideas, even especially nowadays. Um, it's you're either with me or against me. I think the how do you say the the illusion I feel is that we have any degree of certainty. You know, though this is there are certain things we could kind of expect. I just say this way: living in Florida, if you're gonna go to the beach when it doesn't rain, you'll never go to the beach because it does rain often. Um, if the goal is not to feel any strain or have people who think and are great and high fiving each other just because everything's going well, doesn't really, for me, from my experience of what I've seen, it doesn't always correlate that way. It doesn't always work out that way because we are always ever changing. My priorities are continuing to change. So, what is building a safer community? In the macro sense, yes, we want to protect those. We have police who protect and serve. We have courts to try to protect our communities. Now, when we think about the internet, that's a whole nother thing. And when we think about schools, and there's been plenty of school shootings, we think about shootings in general. And this podcast is not. No, I don't tend to even trend in the idea of talk about polarizing topics. But when we think about, I can't talk about building a safer community without at least touching upon some of these things that have changed, of how we see. One thing is information. How we receive information has changed. How we process information has changed. I find it inspiring And I remember one of my friends thought it was gut wrenchingly stressful. But I think it's inspiring as humans to admit the limits. I think for me, going through what I've been through in my earlier years and going through a lot of healing and recovery, I am reminded of how humbling it is, how many times I didn't know things. Some of the best teachers I've experienced and I was lucky to experience were ones who had a balance of what they did and what they didn't know. And they didn't, it wasn't a matter of that their value increased of how much they did know. And I feel what we do with information is also important and can build a safer, I guess, a safer community in the micro sense. So a lot of times, I remember this one I usually use this comedian John Mulaney, but he said in college it's should I? It's in the essence he's like, um, do my friends hate me or should I go to sleep? Like the idea is we a lot of times think a lot about how others think about us. Um, let alone we don't think about what maybe we are feeling or what we may need to change. Friendships change, and it's not always bad. Our priorities change. If I um, like to do a certain thing with I don't know. If used to like to draw per se, but I am so eager to not quote unquote be alone, and I stopped drawing. I do feel that a lot of times that works negatively. It's not losing yourself to find something else, but it's just becoming becoming more. A lot of times I try to remind myself that it's okay to have hobbies. I do. A lot of those who listen to me know that I do like gaming. I do find gaming cathartic. I do like, but there's certain things that I don't, I guess, thrust myself into. I know that I know I'm not the best gamer. I know I'm not great at any. But the thing is, what is the goal? Well, for me, sometimes when I'm coming back from work, I like to just unwind. I like to have that safe community at home. I talk to my wife. I share with her my day the most I can. But at the end of the day, I'm home. So community starts at home. Um, I think when we think about defining things in our lives, um, I think starting from the closest, I guess, people in your lives. Like I said, the theme this month is building a safer community, and you can't really build a safer community if you don't define what a community is to you, and why is it important. For me, a safer community allows me to hold myself accountable and try to be better. And it's not to be better for so and so they can give me recognition for what a great job I did. And even though we may start there, but for me, I want to maybe get better. Maybe, for instance, I want to be healthier. Well, okay. Why do I want to be healthier? Well, because I want to be around. I want to be able to do things with my wife. I want to be able to do things with my nephew and nieces. I want to be able to be around long term. I've said this before. If, um, especially even investments, if you think long term, you usually make wiser decisions. When you think about relationships long term, you usually do make wiser decisions because um, you give yourself a little bit of grace to kind of make those corrections. It's unrealistic to kind of get it right the first time. And as I said before, information right now is so available to all of us. What year was the Stamp Act enacted? Well, I don't know, but I can find out in, I don't know, a few seconds from my phone. It's not that impressive to, I would say, test well. Why is this important when it comes to, well, why does that kind of speak to me when I think of building a safer community? Because it starts from you. I could say what a safer community is, but it's very subjective to what your priorities are. A safer community to you might be being on a boat in the ocean, maybe just sailing with those who are closest to you. A safer community could be riding your motorcycles across the United States, across the 48, and that's your safest place. Or a safer community could be a church, being involved in church, connecting with those in a spiritual sense. Or a safer community could be whatever hobby. It could be, building fish tanks, or like having saltwater fish tank. I know one of my friends does that a lot, and I feel whatever it is, that could be a safe community. And I feel when it comes to, like, in the beginning of this episode, this episode, I did mention that a lot of times in the micro sense, if we're not really, at least from my experience, if we're not really addressing what a safer, or what building a safer community is, a lot of times we can feel left unsupported. And it could be true or could be not true, but if we don't take the time to discover what that means, you could be highly influenced by external forces. So it's not that it's bad that you may not know, but I do encourage those who are listening to find out what a safer community looks like, and not just because we're just like sort of kind of getting out of COVID, but more because it matters of how you look at things. Bitterness does impact you. All the intangible things that we can't really feel do impact you. Just like I said, Khalid Gibran says, I've learned silence from the talkative, toleration from the intolerant, and kindness from the unkind. Yet strange, I am ungrateful for these teachers. Sometimes we look at those situations as, oh, thank goodness it's over. Hindsight's 2020. We could learn a lot from those cringeworthy conversations, those cringeworthy moments where you didn't really like how a person carried themselves. Well, not that it's easy, and none of this is easy. I would encourage to find out why it bothered you, and then one thing I try to practice, because I am kind of fairly outspoken. If I'm in a group setting, I try to not immediately share a story, because that's something I'm more prone to, or not immediately be the first one sharing. I try to listen more. It's not like, oh, I've made it to listen. So these are kind of ways for me to combat and to address this idea of how we learn. And I feel when it comes to all this reflecting, then we could actually, at least from my experience, really understand what a safer community is. And why talk about safer community? Well, someone once told me, a lot of times we may ask, well, put it this way, it was either a post one of my friends sent, but she said that the hardest 3 words to say is "I need help." And I feel in the micro sense, if we're never really at a static place where we're like, oh, I made it. If we really think about it. But when you're building a safer community, I think one of the big tales that is a safer community is that you're able to say, I need help. And in the field that I work in, and some of the context of what we talk about in Revive Ministries, asking that you need help can be life or death. Unfortunately, things are extremely hard. Some of the stories, some of the situations, some of the guests who come here and share what they've been through has been terribly hard. And I have no idea how that might have felt. However, I would venture, and I would just assume that they were on my podcast because one time in their life they said to themselves, or they asked someone that they needed help. A community is one that serves one another, and one way I feel we can serve not only just by helping others, but also by helping ourselves. So when I think about the idea, as we have each month a different theme, we went through starting a new chapter, connecting with our support, discovering what's next. A building a safer community requires subtle but necessary, I feel, reflection on what's important to you. Not what someone else told you was important, but what is important to you. Because when it comes to, I guess, what I've seen more sustainable is when you truly believe that you want to be better, not because of something external, and or you want that safe place. Not to minimize those around the world who really would do anything for somewhere safe. Unfortunately, speaking in the States, a safe place could be surrounding myself with positive people that I can hold myself accountable if I don't follow through. And it's okay because accountability is not a bad word there. But a safe place in other regards is literally just being safe. Literally being that I'm not abused. I'm not, my life is not threatened today. And I'm not minimizing that. So, obviously, um, um, when it comes to safety, there's all a spectrum of when we think about safety. I cannot really think clearly if I don't feel safe in my community. I can't think about what's best for me if I don't about if I don't feel safe in my community. And I definitely won't be asking for help if I don't feel safe in my community. So those are really my final thoughts when I think about building a safer community. It's important because foundationally, when it does rain, and it pours, when things get heavier in your life, when you have a community that you can ask a simple 3-word statement or a question, I would say, I need help. I feel that's the direction, and that's what I want to really impose. You may not be where you want to be. You may not be as safe as you would like to be, but I would argue if you're able to say I need help, it may be the first steps to somewhere that may be a little bit safer. Not to minimize for those who are not currently in a safe place, not to minimize the actual physical dangers out there that may make your community not safe. But it starts from you, I would say, when it comes to understanding what you consider safe. So, building a safer community has a lot to do of how you reflect on what a community is and what's important to you and what being safe means. Again, I just want to say thank you to all the guests who've been on. It's been a wonderful couple years, and then for me, I feel like I've just started. And I really, if you are interested in being on the podcast, I do encourage you to email us at info@reviveministriesfl.com. Again, you can find all this information on the website. Remember, our website is reviveministriesfl.com. This is goodbye from Revive Ministries Podcast. Leaving you with this last quote. It's from Brené Brown. He says, "Vulnerability is not about winning or losing. It's having the courage to show up even when you can't control the outcome."